Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I turn to the European Council, I am sure the whole House will join me in condemning the killing of Jamal Khashoggi in the strongest possible terms. We must get to the truth of what happened, and my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, will be making a statement shortly. Mr. Speaker, on the European Council, in addition to Brexit, there were important discussions on security and migration. First, at last Monday's Foreign Ministers' meeting, my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, and his French counterpart secured agreement on a new EU sanctions regime on the use of chemical weapons. At this Council, I argued, along with Dutch Prime Minister Rutte, that we should also accelerate work on further measures, including sanctions, to respond to and deter cyber attacks. The attempted hacking of the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons in The Hague earlier this year was a stark example of the very real threats we face. We must impose costs on all those who seek to do us harm, regardless of the means they use, and this Council agreed to take that work forward. Second, in marking Anti-Slavery Day, I welcomed the continued commitment of all EU leaders in working together to eliminate the barbaric crime of people trafficking. We reaffirmed our shared commitments to doing more to tackle the challenges of migration upstream. Following the Council, I met Premier Lee of China, President Moon of South Korea, and Prime Minister Lee of Singapore at the ASEM Summit. Since 2010, our trade with Asia has grown by almost 50%, more than with any other continent in the world. I want to develop that even further. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the ability to develop our own new trade deals is one of the great opportunities of Brexit. So at this summit, we discussed how the UK can build the most ambitious economic partnerships with all our Asian partners as we leave the European Union. And we also agreed to deepen our cooperation across shared threats to our security. Turning to Brexit, Mr. Speaker, let me begin with the progress we have made on both the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration on our future relationship. As I reported to the House last Monday, the shape of the deal across the vast majority of the withdrawal agreement is now clear. Since Salzburg, we have agreed the broad scope of provisions that set out the governance and dispute resolution arrangements for our withdrawal agreement. We have developed a protocol relating to the UK sovereign base areas in Cyprus. Following discussions with Spain and in close cooperation with the government of Gibraltar, we have also developed a protocol and a set of underlying memoranda relating to Gibraltar, heralding a new era in our relations. And we have broad agreement on the structure and scope of the future relationship, with important progress made on issues like security, transport and services. And this progress in the last 3 weeks builds on the areas where we have already reached agreement on citizens' rights, on the financial settlement, on the implementation period, and in Northern Ireland, agreement on the preservation of the particular rights for UK and Irish citizens, and on the special arrangements between us, such as the Common Travel Area, which has existed since before either the UK or Ireland ever became members of the European Economic Community. Mr. Speaker, taking all of this together, 95% of the withdrawal agreement and its protocols are now settled. There is one real sticking point left, but a considerable one, which is how we guarantee that in the unlikely event our future relationship is not in place by the end of the implementation period, there is no return to a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The commitment to avoiding a hard border is one this House emphatically endorsed and enshrined in law in the Withdrawal Act earlier this year. As I set out last week, the original backstop proposal from the EU was one we could not accept, as it would mean creating a customs border down the Irish Sea and breaking up the integrity of our United Kingdom. I do not believe that any UK Prime Minister could ever accept this, and I certainly will not. But as I said in my Mansion House speech, we chose to leave. We have a responsibility to help find a solution. So earlier this year, we put forward a counter-proposal for a temporary UK-EU joint customs territory for the backstop. And in a substantial shift in their position since Salzburg, the EU are now actively working with us on this proposal. But a number of issues remain. The EU argue that they cannot give a legally binding commitment to a UK-wide customs arrangement in the withdrawal agreement, so their original proposal must remain a possibility. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, people are understandably worried that we could get stuck in a backstop that is designed only to be temporary. And there are also concerns that Northern Ireland could be cut off from accessing its most important market, Great Britain. During last week's Council, I had good discussions with Presidents Juncker, Tusk and Macron, Chancellor Merkel and Taoiseach Varadkar and others about how to break this impasse. I believe there are 4 steps we need to take. First, we must make the commitment to a temporary UK-EU joint customs territory legally binding, so the Northern Ireland-only proposal is no longer needed. This would not only protect relations north-south, but also vitally east-west. This is critical. The relationship between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK is an integral strand of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. So to protect that agreement, we need to preserve the totality of relationships it sets out. Nothing we agree with the EU under Article 50 should risk a return to a hard border or threaten the delicate constitutional and political arrangements underpinned by the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The second step is to create an option to extend the implementation period as an alternative to the backstop. Mr. Speaker, I've not committed to extending the implementation period. I do not want to extend the implementation period, and I do not believe that extending it will be necessary. I see any extension or being in any form of backstop as undesirable. By far the best outcome for the UK, for Ireland and for the EU is that our future relationship is agreed and in place by the 1st of January 2021. I have every confidence that it will be, and the European Union have said they will show equal commitment to this timetable. But the impasse we are trying to resolve is about the insurance policy if this does not happen. So what I'm saying is that if at the end of 2020 our future relationship was not quite ready, the proposal is that the UK would be able to make a sovereign choice between the UK-wide customs backstop or a short extension of the implementation period. And, Mr. Speaker, there are some limited circumstances in which it could be argued that an extension to the implementation period might be preferable if we were certain it was only for a short time. For example, a short extension to the implementation period would mean only one set of changes for businesses at the point we move to the future relationship. But in any such scenario, we would have to be out of this implementation period well before the end of this Parliament. The third step, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that were we to need either of these insurance policies, whether the backstop or a short extension to the implementation period, we could not be kept in either arrangement indefinitely. We would not accept a position in which the UK, having negotiated in good faith an agreement which prevents a hard border in Northern Ireland, nonetheless finds itself locked into an alternative, inferior arrangement against our will. The fourth step, Mr. Speaker, is for the Government to deliver the commitment we have made to ensure full continued access for Northern Ireland's businesses to the whole of the UK internal market. Northern Ireland's businesses rely heavily on trade with their largest market, Great Britain, and we must protect this in any scenario. Mr. Speaker, let us remember that all of these steps are about insurance policies that no one in the UK or the EU wants or expects to use. So we cannot let this become the barrier to reaching the future partnership we all want to see. We have to explore every possible option to break the impasse, and that is what I am doing. When I stood in Downing Street and addressed the nation for the first time, I pledge that the government I lead will not be driven by the interests of the privileged few, but of ordinary working families. And that is what guides me every day in these negotiations. Before any decision, I ask, how do I best deliver the Brexit that the British people voted for? How do I best take back control of our money, borders and laws? How do I best protect jobs and make sure nothing gets in the way of our brilliant entrepreneurs and small businesses? How do I best protect the integrity of our precious United Kingdom and protect the historic progress we have made in Northern Ireland? And if doing those things means I get difficult days in Brussels, then so be it.
There's far too much noise in the chamber. Everybody knows from all the record that there's plenty of opportunity to question the Prime Minister on these occasions, but the Prime Minister must be heard. The Prime Minister.
The Brexit talks are not about my interests, they are about the national interest and the interests of the whole of the United Kingdom. Serving our national interest will demand that we hold our nerve through these last stages of the negotiations, the hardest part of all. It will mean not giving in to those who want to stop Brexit with a politician's vote. Politicians telling the people they got it wrong the first time and should try again. And it will mean focusing on the prize that lies before us, the great opportunities that we can open up for our country when we clear these final hurdles in the negotiations. That is what I'm working to achieve, and I commend this statement to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for the advanced copy of her statement, and I'm pleased that she's condemned the horrific murder of Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. But condemnation, Mr. Speaker, is not enough. What matters now is what action the government is prepared to take. Will they now end arms sales to Saudi Arabia? Moving on to Brexit, I hope our debate today will be conducted without some of the language reported in the press over the weekend. I have to say, every word on Brexit was anticipated, a mixture of failure, denial and delusion. The Conservative Party has spent the past 2 years arguing with itself instead of negotiating a sensible deal in the public interest. And even at this crucial point, they're still bickering amongst themselves. The Prime Minister says 95% of the deal is done, but previously she had told us nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Which is it? Their Brexit negotiations have been a litany of missed deadlines, shambolic failure, and now they're begging for extra time. They promised the interim agreement would be done by October 2017, then December 2017, and finally agreed in March 2018. The Prime Minister even missed the deadline for publishing her own government's white paper on Brexit, saying it would be published in June. It arrived in mid-July, lacking any clarity on the key issues, and crucially after the EU summit at which Britain's proposals were supposed to have been tabled. And just last week, the government missed its October deadline for agreeing to the terms of the exit deal with the EU. Instead, the Prime Minister went to Brussels to beg for an extension. The EU had already offered to convene a special summit in November to help the Prime Minister, but it now seems this has been withdrawn as she won't be ready by then either. So now December is being talked about. And the Prime Minister claims her extension of the transition period will only be for a matter of months. Is that 3? Is that 6? Is that 12? Is that 18? How many months is it? Who knows? But certainly the Prime Minister does not. But can the Prime Minister give one straight answer? What will it cost in extra payments to the EU per month during this extension? The government is only proposing this extension because of its own incompetence. We've had 2.5 years watching the Tories' failure to negotiate. Now even the Prime Minister doesn't have confidence she can negotiate a deal by December 2020. That is another 14 months. What faith can anyone have that extending that deadline by a matter of months will help? Perhaps the Prime Minister can inform the House. The Prime Minister also begged European leaders to come up with creative solutions. The country voted to leave, her cabinet members said they would take back control, and now the Prime Minister is pleading with the EU to work out how to do it. It doesn't sound like taking back control, it sounds like a government and a Prime Minister that is losing control. This government is terminally incompetent, hamstrung by its own divisions. The Prime Minister of Lithuania summed up the situation pretty succinctly when he said, "We do not know what they want. They do not know themselves what they really want. That is the problem." I'm sure the whole House would love to...
Order. There was too much noise when the Prime Minister was addressing the House. Mr Opperman, not only are you a distinguished barrister and a Minister of the Crown, you are a graduate of the University of Buckingham in my constituency. I cannot believe that you were taught to behave in that way, chuntering noisily from a sedentary position by lecturers in my constituency. Mr Jeremy Corbyn.
I'm sure the whole House would love to hear their precise and detailed blueprint. Perhaps when she comes back to the dispatch box, the Prime Minister could set out her plan. The whole country is waiting for a plan that works for Britain, not another fudge kicking the can down the road to keep her party in power. Much of the current impasse is due to the Northern Ireland border. Hardly an issue that can come as a surprise to government. There is a simple solution, a comprehensive customs union with the EU, a solution that not only benefits Northern Ireland, but would help to safeguard skilled jobs in every region and nation of Britain. No hard border in Ireland and no hard border down the Irish Sea, and good jobs for every region and nation. That, Mr Speaker, is a deal that could command a majority of support in this House and the support of businesses and unions. It is Labour's plan, a comprehensive customs union with a real say for Britain, with no race to the bottom on regulations, standards and rights. The alternative is not no deal, but a workable plan. This government doesn't even trust its own benches to have a meaningful vote, with the Brexit Secretary submitting a letter that told us we must choose between a disastrous no deal and the government deal, a deal which doesn't yet exist, for which there is now no deadline. Mr Speaker, Brexit was supposed to be about taking back control, but what much of her cabinet campaigned for, and where have we ended up? Parliament being denied the chance to take back control, and because of this government's vacillation, 5 years on from the referendum, we could still be paying into the EU with no MEPs, no seat at the Council of Ministers, no commissioners and no say for this country. Instead of taking back control, they're giving away our say and paying for the privilege. What an utter shambles. Having utterly failed to act in the public interest, will the Prime Minister do so now and make way for a government that can and will?
Can I first of all say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, there was an awful lot in his comments about process, but not actually that much about substance and about what they actually want to see. Can I also say to him this? That I think it is incumbent on all of us in public life to be careful about the language we use. There are passionate beliefs and passionate views that are held on this subject and other subjects, but whatever the subject is, we should all be careful about our language. Now, there was an awful lot about process, as I say, in which he seemed to be at one point asking us to set out our plan. Well, I have to say to him, we set out our plan. We set it out in a white paper of over 100 pages back in the summer. And he talks about a future relationship of a customs union. But whatever future relationship we do have to deal with this backstop issue, because without a backstop in the withdrawal agreement, there'll be no withdrawal agreement. Without the withdrawal agreement, there'll be no future relationship. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So it doesn't matter what future relationship you want. We do actually need to deal with this backstop issue. And his position has been that no deal is not acceptable in any circumstances. Well, that means accepting any deal the European Union wants to give us, including including a deal which would carve Northern Ireland out away from the United Kingdom. Although perhaps, of course, as his Shadow Chancellor, from the comments his Shadow Chancellor has made, we know he might actually welcome that when he said he was longing for a united Ireland. All I have to say to the right honourable gentleman is, throughout all of this, all we have seen from the Labour Party, from him, is playing politics with this issue. 1 minute they want to accept the referendum, the next they want a second referendum. 1 minute they want to say free movement will end, the next they say free movement is still on the table. 1 minute they want to do trade deals, the next minute they want to be in customs union that will stop them from doing trade deals. He is doing everything he can to frustrate Brexit and trigger a general election. He's voted against sufficient progress, he's tried to block the Withdrawal Act, he's vowed to oppose any deal that the government brings back. I'm looking and working for the right deal in the national interest for this country. He's putting politics ahead of the national interest.
Mr. William Cash.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend has stated, and I quote, "We will not have truly left the European Union," and I emphasise the words truly and left the European Union, "if we are not in control of our own laws." Chequers is still on the table. Its common rule book allows the other 27 EU countries in their Council of Ministers to make our laws for goods and agricultural products with no transcript and no effective veto, and undermines the total repeal of the 1972 Act. How can she possibly claim that we will be in control of our own laws and sustain the national interest?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that, yes, we have proposed that common rule book. It is rules that our manufacturers say they will be abiding by in any case. It's been a pretty stable rule book for the last many years. But also, it is not correct to say that there will not be a parliamentary lock on those rules. Yes, the process of determining any change to those rules will be at the European Union. Some of those are actually international standards where we will have a say as an independent member of the international standards bodies in relation to those rules. But Parliament will have a lot. We've been clear and we set it out in the proposals published after the Chequers meeting in July, that any decision to accept those rules or determine, there's a process about determining materiality, but any decision to accept those rules or diverge from them will be a decision that will be taken by this Parliament.
Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for advance notice of her statement today. I share with her the remarks that she made about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, but can I say that the time has come to take action against Saudi Arabia. Prime Minister, stop arms sales to Saudi Arabia, do it today. You know, really have I listened to a Prime Ministerial statement with such stony faces. Prime Minister, some advice. If you're looking for support, don't look behind you. The Prime Minister returns to the House today from Brussels utterly humiliated. As the clock ticks down, with just a few short months before the UK is scheduled to leave the EU, with Chequers shredded, the UK has no plan to break the impasse. No plan as we head ever closer to the cliff edge. Why? Because the Prime Minister is humiliated and hamstrung by the extreme Brexiteers in her own party. Mr. Speaker, the EU 27 speak with one clear voice. The Conservative government squabbles amongst itself. The divisions amongst the Tory party are paralysing the UK government. The extreme Brexiteers on the government benches are holding the UK to ransom, leading us all to the brink of a catastrophic no deal. The Prime Minister comes before us today with nothing but jargon and rhetoric. It is crystal clear that the EU will not accept any deal that does not include the backstop for Northern Ireland. Those who attempt to wreck the backstop will be responsible for a no-deal Brexit. Mr. Speaker, the EU is not bluffing. Can I say the comments from Tory MPs in the papers this weekend, using crass and violent language in relation to the negotiations, is abhorrent and irresponsible. Those responsible need to withdraw and apologise such language has no part to play in our public discourse. And, Mr. Speaker, it is disappointing when the threats of violence against the Prime Minister are talked about, that we get noise, and all we get is a background noise and a lack of understanding of the seriousness of the situation we're in. They should be ashamed of themselves. Threats of violence against the Prime Minister or anyone else must be called out, and those responsible held to account. The Prime Minister must face them down, and she will have our support in that. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister must act to protect jobs and living standards by ensuring we stay in the customs union and the single market. No more games. Can I ask the Prime Minister to focus her attention now on securing a deal that delivers economic protection? Will the Prime Minister ensure that any extended transition period must be for a clear purpose to confirm to the House today that her government will support the Northern Ireland backstop in order to avoid a no-deal Brexit? Will she also commit to giving the Scottish Parliament a say on the outcome of the negotiations? And finally, can I ask the Prime Minister to make it her immediate objective to keep us in the single market and the customs union, and to focus her attentions on that, and to acknowledge that she will not get any other deal through this Parliament that stops short of the economic protection of jobs and living standards.
Can I first of all say to the right honourable gentleman, as I responded to the Leader of the Opposition, I do think that it is important that we all consider the language that we use, those of us in public life. There seemed to be some confusion from the right honourable gentleman in what he was saying in relation to the backstop. The government is clear that we are negotiating for there to be a backstop in the withdrawal agreement. The question is, what are the terms of that backstop? As I have said, I repeat it in my statement, a backstop as proposed by the EU that would effectively create that customs border down the Irish Sea is not acceptable to the UK government. Hence, other proposals have been put forward, and we have, as I have said, made significant progress since Salzburg in working with the European Union, particularly on the UK EU-wide customs territory. He asks me to find a deal that protects jobs. That is exactly what we have proposed to the European Union, a job that protects our economy, that protects jobs, that ensures that we continue to have a good trading relationship with the European Union, but also are able to develop new trading relationships and improve trading relationships with other countries around the rest of the world. And I also say to the right honourable gentleman that it is important, as we look ahead to getting this deal. He also seems to think that if the only issue that could lead to a no deal is actually not having a backstop in the withdrawal agreement. Certainly if there's no withdrawal agreement and no future relationship, then there is no deal. But of course we have to ensure, and we're still at the closing stages of the negotiations, nobody knows absolutely what the result will be. I think the best outcome for the UK is a good deal, but we continue to prepare for the possibility of a no deal. And I can assure the right honourable gentleman that what we will be doing is not following the example of the SNP, who want to put Scotland back into the European Union and back into the common fisheries policy, and that's not in the interests of Scotland.
Order. Very large number of honourable and right honourable members are seeking to catch my eye, but I remind the House that there is a further statement to follow, that coming from the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, and there are the remaining stages of a bill before the House. So there is a premium upon brevity to be exemplified first by Mr John Redwood.
What advantages does the Prime Minister expect to get in the future partnership arrangement that will be better than leaving and spending the £39 billion at home with a huge boost to our economy and public services?
Can I say to my right honourable friend that I believe that a future partnership that protects jobs, a future partnership that ensures we have a good trading relationship with the European Union is worth negotiating for and is worth achieving for the United Kingdom. And there are many who say to me in this House that we want to ensure that we have good trading relationships on better than WTO deals around the rest of the world. And I agree that actually having those good trading relationships on better than WTO deals is a good thing to do, and that's what I want to achieve with the European Union.
Sir Vincent Cable.
Can I first add my condemnation of the abuse directed at the Prime Minister? The Sunday Times, and again the Times this morning, reported that Whitehall, including the Brexit department, is now carrying out contingency planning for a people's vote. Can the Prime Minister elaborate and confirm that this has ministerial endorsement?
No, that is not correct. The government does not support a second referendum.
Justine Greening.
Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister accept that should her deal fail to secure support in this House, and then with no further road left for negotiations so that there is parliamentary gridlock, that the only inevitable way forward, whether we like it or not, will then be to allow people to decide via either a second referendum or a general election, and the former would surely be preferable to the latter?
I say to my right honourable friend, and I recognise from other questions she's asked me on this issue that there is a difference of view between us on this, about an issue on the second referendum. I believe that the people voted in 2016. They had that people's vote. They decided to leave the European Union, and I believe it is our duty. I believe it's part of the issue of faith and trust and the integrity of politicians that we deliver on what people voted for and that we deliver to leave the European Union.
Sammy Wilson.
Speaker. Our position is that the backstop is neither necessary and is damaging. And the EU have made it clear that the backstop is designed to keep Northern Ireland as part of the customs union territory of the EU. The Prime Minister gave an assurance in the withdrawal agreement that any such backstop would have to, and regulatory barriers would have to have the support of the Northern Ireland Executive and the Northern Ireland Assembly. Is that still her position?
Can I first of all say to the honourable gentleman that we did put that out in the backstop, and we stand in the joint report, and we stand by what we put in that joint report. Can I also say to him that it is precisely the suggestion from the European Union that Northern Ireland be kept in a customs union, while the rest of the United Kingdom is a different relationship with the European Union, that this government has rejected, because we want to ensure that we leave the European Union as one united kingdom.
Barad.
Could I join other colleagues here in utterly condemning the use of language that we saw in the fond hope that we won't see any sort of language like that in the future? At the start of the Prime Minister's statement, Mr. Speaker, she talked about the work that had been done on cybersecurity and on the OPCW. I remain very concerned about the progress that's being made on the security treaty to make sure that we maintain those high levels of security when we leave the European Union, so that we can continue to keep British citizens safe and indeed EU citizens throughout the Europe.
Can I hope, reassure my right honourable friend in saying that actually we have been making good progress on the issue of internal security and indeed external security arrangements for our future relationship with the European Union, though there are still discussions, negotiations being undertaken to ensure that we can retain the operational capabilities that ensure that we're able to not only work to keep our citizens safe, but work to keep citizens across the EU safe.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Economic Secretary invited me to put this question to the Prime Minister earlier, so I will. He told the House that he expected the negotiations on the future partnership to be concluded by December 2020. The Prime Minister has just spoken about a short extension of the implementation period, but back in June, the government, when it published its backstop proposal, said it expected the future arrangements to be in place by the end of December 2021. Could the Prime Minister tell the House which of those dates represents the government view? And if she'd like to continue the game of pass the parcel with the question, could she encourage the Brexit Secretary to keep the promise he made to the Brexit Select Committee to come and give evidence to us after the October European Council? Can I say to the right honourable gentleman? Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that we are working for and expect to have agreed the terms of the future relationship by the end of December 2020, such that that future relationship can come into place on the 1st of January 2021. When we published the temporary customs arrangement as the customs proposal for the backstop on Northern Ireland in June, what we said was if that backstop was necessary to come into place, because for some reason that future relationship could not come into place on the 1st of January
January 2021, then we would expect that to last no longer than the end of December 2021.
Sir Roger Gale.
Speaker, I first concur with my right honourable friend, the member for Hastings, and say that I believe that most on these benches, and indeed most in the House, utterly condemn and regard with disdain the tone of some of the language used at the weekend. Second, is it not the case that talk of a second referendum at this crucial stage in the negotiations can only undermine the Prime Minister's negotiating position? And will she carry on, ignore the siren voices, and get the best deal she can for the people of this country?
Can I first of all thank my honourable friend and indeed my right honourable friend, the member for Hastings, for the comments they've made in relation to certain language that's been used. Can I say to him that I agree? I think it's important at this stage of the negotiations that the European Union is in no doubt that we will be leaving the European Union on the 29th of March next year, and that we are negotiating our withdrawal agreement and our future relationship. And my determination is to put the national interest first and get a good deal for the UK.
Can I very gently say to colleagues, because I've seen a number of scripts around the House of prepared questions, that given the level of interest, if a colleague has got a question of more than 50 words, and the device that I would recommend is the use of the blue pencil. Yvette Cooper.
The Prime Minister and I have had many disagreements on many things, but I stand with her completely against the violent, dehumanising and frankly misogynistic language that we have seen, that I hope the whole House will condemn because it demeans every single one of us. The Prime Minister has previously said that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Could she tell the House what proportion of the future partnership agreement she thinks has been reached?
Can I thank the right honourable lady for the comments that she made about the use of language. What the position we're in is that 95% of the withdrawal agreement, as I said, has been agreed, and we have a substantial part in relation to security, services, transport and other issues of the future relationship in terms of the structure and scope of that future relationship, which has been agreed. Of course, the point is none of this is finally agreed until leaders look at the package and agree the whole package together. Hence, the nothing is agreed until everything is agreed.
He himself, Sir Desmond Swain.
Original technical proposal and the facilitated customs agreement have both been rejected. So what can she conceive that might be brought forward to solve the Northern Ireland problem in the next 2 or even 3 years?
Right, can I say to my right honourable friend that actually those two have not both been completely rejected, as he suggests. In fact, as I said, we've made substantial progress. There's been a substantial shift from the EU since Salzburg in agreeing to look at the arrangements for a UK EU-wide customs backstop, which was exactly what we put forward in the TCA.
George Howarth.
Are they hard facts, Mr. Speaker? The fact that, first of all, the European Union won't agree anything that's not in their interest. Her cabinet's split 3 ways. This House is split at least 7 ways, and any solution she comes up with, half the country will think she's gone too far, and the other half she hasn't gone far enough. When will she realise she completely lost control of the situation?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, I think actually from the discussions that I have with members of the public on this issue, the members of the public, regardless of what the majority of members of the public, regardless of what they voted in the referendum, actually now have a very simple message to all of us in this House: is let's just get on with it and leave the EU.
Sir Oliver Heald.
As we enter the final furlong with 95% of the agreement reached, does she agree with me that it's been a cool and calculated approach which has led to this progress? And isn't it now the time, in the interests of all the businesses in Britain that want as smooth and frictionless trade as possible, to really kick on and get this agreement? And does she agree with me that it might even be necessary to take the whip out, all within rules, of course, and push this further, because we've got to reach this agreement as soon as possible?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I absolutely agree with him. We should get on and focus on the end point of this, which is getting the agreement, getting a good deal for the UK, and enabling us to leave on those good terms.
Caroline Lucas.
Speaker, will the Prime Minister be clear that she is abandoning the promise of a deal that delivers the exact same benefits, particularly as far as services are concerned? And will she acknowledge that that's yet another pledge that has been broken and therefore yet another reason for a people's vote?
I say to the Honourable Lady that if she looks at the various speeches that I have given throughout this process, I have been clear that there will be differences, there will be changes in our relationship with the EU. There will be, but what we are doing is proposing a good relationship with the European Union, a good trading relationship and a good security relationship, which I believe is in the interests of the UK.
Steve Baker.
Speaker, the person or persons who directed violent language at my right honourable friend have thoroughly disgraced themselves. I very much hope that they are discovered, and I hope that she will withdraw the whip from them. What acceleration has been made on preparations for no deal since July?
Can I thank my honourable friend for the supportive comments he's made about the language that was used at the weekend. Significant progress has been made on the no-deal preparations since July, and I commend my honourable friend for the work that he did on these when he was in the Brexit exiting the EU department. I think you can see some of the progress not only from legislation that has been passed in this House, but also from the technical notices that have been issued, which have been a crucial part of ensuring that businesses and others outside the government are aware of what is necessary in a no-deal situation.
Catherine McKinnell.
The government does seem to have got itself into a bit of a hole, so it is understandable why it wishes to avoid parliamentary scrutiny. But can she not see that attempting to render any vote in Parliament meaningless is the very thing that lends weight to the call for a people's vote? And would she not prefer the reassurance of going back to the people to ask them if her deal, or any deal, is what they voted for in 2016?
Can I just say to the Honourable Lady that we have been very clear that the motion will be an amendable motion. But actually I think there's a key here. If you went out and asked members of the public what they think MPs should be voting on, I think they'd say that they would expect MPs to be able to vote on the deal that the government brings back from the European Union.
Politicians vote. Dr. Sarah Wollaston.
Yeah. The only politician's vote would be one which contrived to deny this House a meaningful say and ignored the 700,000 people who walked past the Prime Minister's door at the weekend to demand a people's vote. And that's because it's important that everyone has the chance to weigh up the evidence, look at the pros and cons of the actual deal, and actually give their informed consent before we undertake this major constitutional, economic and social surgery.
Can I say to my honourable friend that I think this term people's vote, we must accept across this House that we gave the people a vote on this issue. There was a people's vote, and people voted in larger numbers than they had done before, and they voted to leave the European Union. And I know my honourable friend, like me, will, I'm sure, be concerned about ensuring that the people actually can have some faith in their politicians. And that means our politicians delivering on the vote of the people and not telling them to think again.
Pat McFadden.
Can the Prime Minister give the House an example of a greater voluntary surrender of sovereignty than the transition deal which he now proposes to extend?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, first of all, I am not standing here proposing to extend the transition period or the implementation period. What I am doing is saying how can we ensure that we have a choice of backstop options to ensure there's no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland in the unlikely circumstances that such a backstop is required. That is the basis on which this other proposal has been put forward, alongside the proposal for a UK EU-wide customs territory, such as the government first put forward in June.
Sir Patrick McLaughlin.
My right honourable friend has been described as a bloody difficult person. I've found her always a very determined person, determined to deliver on the people's vote that has already taken place. Will she tell us, does she expect the final recommendations to come at 4 a.m. and another early plane journey like last time?
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for his comments, and can I say, I think if you look at European negotiations, all too often they do end up in the early hours of the morning. We should be working to ensure that we do this in a timely fashion, recognising that we need to get legislation through this House in order to ensure that that legislation is on the statute book by the 29th of March next week.
Mr. Barry Shearman.
Is the Prime Minister aware that on Friday I was speaking in Belfast's wonderful Titanic Centre? And as I was standing there, it reminded me of that journey, that fateful journey, where the navigation got wrong, the captain got wrong, and all the people on that ship ended in the sea. Can I urge her to think again about the direction of these negotiations? The purpose of the negotiations are to keep our country safe, secure and sound. I support her when she does well in Brussels, unlike the people behind her. Go for it and get us a good deal.
Thank you. The Prime Minister.
Going for it and getting us a good deal is exactly what I'm working on.
Heidi Allen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have no doubt at all that the Prime Minister does think of every individual person in this country when she's negotiating for the best possible deal. But I fail to understand how it can be a politician's vote when nearly 700,000 members of the public take to the streets to display their dissatisfaction. So I ask her again, what will she do if we come to the position of no deal that will not get through this House? What other options are there?
Can I say to my honourable friend that I think we should all recall that the vote that took place in 2016 was in larger numbers than we'd ever seen people voting before, and that decision was to leave the European Union. We have set out, it is set out in legislation, the process that will be followed by the government were we to be in the situation where a deal brought back by the government from the European Union and put to this House was rejected by this House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been so disappointing to hear the Prime Minister be so dismissive of the 700,000 people from across our country who took to the streets on Saturday to demand a people's vote on the final deal. What did she say to the thousands of young people who led that march, but who didn't get a say 2 years ago and whose future will be most adversely affected if she ploughs on with her disastrous plans?
What I say to young people is what this government is doing is working to get a good deal that is going to ensure that they have a great future in this country outside the European Union.
Mr. Nicholas Bowles.
Mr. Speaker, during the implementation period, the UK would be subject to all EU rules, including freedom of movement. Why then does my right honourable friend continue to rule out membership of the European Economic Area and the European Free Trade Association as an alternative interim state?
Can I say to my honourable friend that what, of course, we are looking at in relation to the proposals that have been put forward is for a limited time period to have the backstop that ensures no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The two proposals that have been put forward deliver on that. There are, where it would come to the situation as proposed that it was a sovereign choice for the UK, of course decisions would have to be taken about the wider issues in terms of the exact arrangements for those proposals. But the key thing is for those proposals to actually ensure that we have no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Prime Minister, Chequers is dead. Parliamentary maths mean the current proposal being considered by the EU is dead. And no deal is dead because there is a pragmatic majority in this House who will prevent this economic and social catastrophe for our communities. Will she now switch to EFTA, EEA and a time-limited membership of the Customs Union? History is always kinder to leaders who act in the national interest.
I seem to recall that the honourable gentleman asked me a very similar question last Monday, and I'm afraid he's not going to get a different answer from the one that I gave him last Monday. We are working for a good deal in terms of leaving the European Union and ensuring we have that trading deal that protects jobs in this country.
Well, as I often observe, repetition is not a novel phenomenon in the House of Commons. James Dadridge.
Speaker, will the backstop have the same legal status as a treaty? Will the agreement have the same legal status as a treaty?
Yes, the backstop for Northern Ireland will be part of the protocol that is attached to the withdrawal agreement, and the withdrawal agreement would have the status of a treaty.
Angela Smith.
Speaker, earlier this year, this House voted to stay in the European Medicines Agency, with all that means for the relationship, the rest of the relationship with the EU. Can I take it from her statement that 95% of the deal is agreed, that we are indeed staying in the EMA?
The 95% relates to the withdrawal agreement. We have agreed the structure and scope of much of the structure and scope of the future partnership. The staying in the European Medicines Agency is one of those issues proposals which we had put forward as part of the plan that came out after the Chequers meeting, our proposals for the future, and that is part of the future partnership, not the withdrawal agreement.
John Whittingdale.
My right honourable friend appreciate the frustration felt by many of my constituents and others, but it is now 2 years, over 2 years since the referendum, and that we have agreed that we will not regain control of our laws, borders and money for over 4 years after the referendum. Does she understand that for many of them and us, that is already too long?
Can I say to my right honourable friend, I absolutely understand. That is why there are some people who have said to me that we should not have triggered Article 50 when we did. I think it was important that we triggered it when we did. It took time to prepare, but then triggered it precisely in order to get this process into play. As he will know, the process within the Article 50 is for 2 years. That's why we will leave the EU on the 29th of March 2019. What we are working to ensure is that we get the future relationship in place at the end of that implementation period, an implementation period which I believe was right and necessary to negotiate in order to ensure that for both citizens and businesses there weren't two cliff edges in the changed relationship with the European Union, but we have a smooth and orderly withdrawal and movement into the next into the future partnership.
Lena Moran.
Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister explain, if she really has the interests of the people of Northern Ireland in her heart, why recently did she not allow a meeting of the joint leaders who backed Remain in Northern Ireland to meet with her? Between them, they represent the majority of voters in Northern Ireland. Is it because she doesn't want to hear what they have to say, because it inconveniently doesn't agree with what she wants?
I say to the Honourable Lady that both I and the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland meet the leaders of all the parties in Northern Ireland and discuss with them a number of issues, including Brexit.
Anna Soubry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a significant number of the 700,000 people who marched for a People's Vote on Saturday were people who run or own their own businesses, and they're in a state of despair because they need certainty, and they haven't got certainty. 2.5 years ago, they were told there would be a trade deal in place before we left. Now we're told we'll be lucky if we get it in 2 years. Isn't this the truth? The government's policy is us to be in a transition period, a never-ending transition period, to a destiny that is completely unknown, over which we have no say and no control. And that's something that nobody voted for.
Can I say to my right honourable friend that no, that is not the position that the government has, and it is not what the government has proposed, and it's not what the government is working on in the negotiations with the European Union. My right honourable friend is right in saying that obviously business wants certainty as soon as it can have that certainty, which is why we're continuing to work to ensure that we can complete these final negotiations so that business will be able to see what the future deal is and be able to see what the future relationship with the European Union will be.
Ian Smith.
Mr. Speaker, on Saturday more than 700,000 people marched peacefully on Parliament and reasonably requested a people's vote on the final deal. May I urge the Prime Minister to listen to those reasonable voices and resist the thuggish and brutish threats that are coming from some on the benches behind her.
Can I say to the Honourable Gentleman, I have answered this question on a number of occasions already this afternoon. I believe it is right that we gave the people the vote in 2016. They voted to leave, and we will deliver on it.
Greg Hands.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition spoke of fudge and shambles, but his policy of leaving the EU but remaining in a customs union would be precisely that. But could my right honourable friend tell us, in such a situation, whether temporary or permanent, Who looks after things like trade remedies, trade defences of key UK industries like steel and ceramics? Who sets the policy, tariff policy for the developing world that we have at the moment through the EU, but we'd like to do on our own? Who is responsible for trade remedies and trade preferences?
Well, can I say to my right honourable friend, obviously as a former trade minister and a position he held with distinction, he understands these issues and the intricacies of these issues. And of course, in a customs union, trade policy with all the issues like trade remedies and trade sanctions will be a matter for the European Union and not for the UK. I believe we should be making those decisions for ourselves here in the UK.
Kate Hoey.
Would the Prime Minister agree with me that, and many people in Northern Ireland, that the remarks of Taoiseach Varadkar at the dinner, which I understand the Prime Minister wasn't at, of showing photographs of a terrible atrocity on the border and then implying that that was somehow what would happen if there was a hard border? The EU doesn't want a hard border, won't put one up. We won't put one up. The Republic of Ireland won't be putting one up. Who is going to put this hard border up?
I say to the right honourable lady that we're obviously committed to no hard border, and we have made clear that in any circumstances, including in a no-deal situation, we would be doing all we could to ensure that there was no hard border. We would look to work with Ireland and the European Union to ensure that there was no hard border, but there has been no commitment in relation to that.
Given how tantalisingly close we are to a deal, if time were to run out, rather than have a general election or a second referendum, has the Prime Minister considered the use of applying to extend Article 50, even if for a limited period, so she can kick the ball over the line?
Exactly. Can I say to my honourable friend that actually we have said right from the beginning that we would not be looking to extend Article 50, and I think it refers back to an earlier question from one of our right honourable friends about people actually wanting to see that we are leaving the European Union. I think we owe it to people to deliver on this. What we want now is to have the decisions that finalise the negotiations to ensure we get that good deal.
Leslie.
Wouldn't it be more honest for the Prime Minister to explain, rather than spinning this is 95% done, and I understand why she wants to do that, that actually the divorce terms are merely the clearing of the throat before a 5-year, maybe 7-year legal treaty arrangement on our future trading relationship? Wouldn't that be a more honest representation? And if people want to end it soon, give the people a final say so that they can decide what to do.
To the right honourable gentleman, no. The reference to the 95% is a factual description of where we are in relation to the withdrawal agreement. Neither side in this negotiation wants to be negotiating for the period of time he has suggested, which is why both sides will be working to ensure that we have that future relationship agreed by December 2020. And I suggest to the honourable gentleman that if he looks at the average time it takes to conduct trade deals, actually there are many trade deals that are done in precisely the sort of time that we're talking about.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I join those who've condemned the excessive and violent language that has been used? And hold up my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, as a role model, as she is always courteous, even to those who disagree with her on this important matter. But coming to the substance of it, when the implementation period was announced, it was going to be the implementation of what had been agreed. It now seems to be a period for further negotiation, not being sure of where we're going. Does the Prime Minister know where we're going?
Can I say to my honourable friend, first of all, that I thank him for the comments he's made about the remarks and language that were used at the weekend. Yes, we do. We have set out our plan. We're negotiating on the basis of that plan with the European Union. As I say, significant elements of the structure and scope of the future relationship have been agreed. The legal position, as I'm sure my honourable friend knows very well, is that we cannot sign up to legal text in relation to that future relationship until we have left the European Union. That is why we are, and I've also said all along, that when Parliament looks at the withdrawal agreement, it will also want to have sufficient detail about the future relationship that it knows what that future relationship will be, and that's what we're working to deliver.
Berta Blackman-Woods.
Mr. Speaker. So can the Prime Minister clarify whether 95% of a withdrawal deal has been agreed with the EU? And if it has, why has this House no details of it?
As I can explain the process in negotiations, our negotiators and we sit down and we talk about these issues. We come to that point of having text on the table. Then that text is looked at by leaders, and a decision is taken by leaders on that text and the future relationship, which will be the final point at which the negotiations are completed and the deal is completed. And this House will then be able to look at all of the details of the withdrawal agreement, of the future relationship, in coming to its decision about whether to accept the deal that the government has negotiated.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
The EU never makes its final concessions until just before any given deadline. What could possibly be gained in 24 months that could not be gained in 21?
Can I say to my honourable friend that the purpose of potentially having a backstop in place is to cover the circumstances where the future relationship cannot be put in place by the 1st of January 2021. And one of the examples, for example, is if it is the case that it has not been fully ratified by all the parliaments in the European Union that need to ratify it. That process is going through, but it hasn't been completed by the end of December 2020. That is the purpose. That's why the backstop is in the withdrawal agreement. It's an insurance policy for that period.
Guinness.
Can the Prime Minister outline what the 5% is that's still to be negotiated?
The backstop.
Gillian Keegan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before entering Parliament, I spent 27 years as a commercial negotiator. However, there is no blueprint for this negotiation. Could the Prime Minister assure the House that she will continue to negotiate the best deal for our country and will not be knocked off course by the continuous speculation from the sidelines?
I thank my honourable friend. At the very beginning of this process, I said there will always be comments being made and statements being made outside of the negotiations. What's important is that I and the government keep our focus on those negotiations and on getting that good deal.
Mr. Speaker, let us be clear what the Prime Minister promised in her Lancaster House speech last year. She promised, and I quote, to have reached an agreement about our future partnership by the time the two-year Article 50 process has concluded, not during the transition period or by the end of it. So can she therefore confirm she will be breaking that promise? We will not have the detail of a legally binding trade agreement in place before we leave, and she is therefore proposing that we pay a divorce bill of over £40 billion without getting that trade deal in return.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that I think there is a misunderstanding of the process, which I thought I had explained in relation to my honourable friend from North Somerset. The process is that we cannot finalise and sign the legal text of our future relationship, a trade partnership with the European Union, until we have left the European Union. What we can do is know what that future relationship is going to be, and the basis of that future relationship, and that's exactly what we're negotiating and will be part of the final deal.
Sir Edward Lee.
May I ask this question, Prime Minister, on behalf of those of us who support you and want to go on supporting you? Will you, or will my right honourable friend confirm what her Brexit Secretary has just said, that the procedure of this House are quite clear, that if there is no deal, there will be a motion or a neutral motion. If there is a deal, the House will indeed be able to reject that deal. But will she make absolutely clear that only the government can initiate legislation? And while she is Prime Minister, on her watch, deal or no deal, deal accepted or rejected, she will deliver Brexit on the 29th of March.
Prime Minister.
Yes, I'm very happy to. I think my right honourable friend, the exiting the EU Secretary, has set out the position in relation to the procedures of this House in the his statement in response to the questions on the statement earlier. But I can absolutely guarantee to my right honourable friend that we will be leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Prime Minister, as she's just replied in her answer to a question a moment ago, what this House will have to vote on is not legal certainty about the future relationship, as she keeps saying to members on this side, but rather a political assertion. So we are being asked to vote on uncertainty. Isn't that right?
No, it is not right. What we will have, and this has been clear right from the very beginning, that it was not possible for the legal treaty, free trade agreement and other aspects to be signed until we were outside the European Union. But what I have also said is that we need to ensure that honourable members and right honourable members of this House, when they come to vote on the overall package, that is the withdrawal agreement and the outline of the future relationship, they have sufficient detail to have confidence in the nature of the future relationship. And an important aspect of this is the linkage that there will be between the withdrawal agreement and the future relationship, because as the EU themselves have said, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed.
Alistair Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will she confirm that when we leave the common fisheries policy in December 2020, that she will not allow our fishing resources to be included in any future trade deal?
I say to my honourable friend, I am absolutely clear. When we leave the common fisheries policy, we will become an independent coastal state. And we will be deciding we will have to sit round the table with others and negotiate with others as an independent coastal state, but we will be doing that on our own, for our own purposes. Unlike, of course, if the SNP had their way, when Scotland would stay in the common fisheries policy, which would be bad for Scottish fishermen.
Stephen Doughty.
Mr. Speaker, I've been attending the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly this morning, and there was a great deal of concern expressed from parties all across these islands about the state of these negotiations, the impact on our economy, peace and stability. The Irish government made very, very clear that putting a time limit on the backstop would rather defeat the objective, and that it must be legally certain. Does she agree?
As I've said, the purpose of the backstop that we're negotiating is to ensure that if there is a period of time between the end of the implementation period and the future relationship coming into operation, that we can still guarantee no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. The best solution for the future, no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and this has been said publicly by the Taoiseach as well, will be achieved through that future relationship. That's why it's important we work on that future relationship being in place for the 1st of January 2021.
Neil. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Prime Minister, earlier today I met a number of business people in my constituency. From the large to the small, the message was, for God's sake, help her to get a deal over the line. It may not be perfect, it may not be everything we want, but a deal that we must have. And as a pro-business leader of a pro-business party, will she make sure that she delivers that and she doesn't allow any dogma to get in the way of it?
I'm very happy to give my honourable friend that assurance. That's exactly what we're doing. We're working for that deal, and a deal that is good for business and good for people.
Emma Reynolds.
I say to the Prime Minister that I found the comments about her from her own MPs this weekend, some of her own MPs, not only deeply offensive, but deeply misogynistic. A number 10 spokesman recently said that there can be no withdrawal agreement without a precise future framework on trade. Will the Prime Minister guarantee that the political declaration will deliver frictionless trade with our largest trading partner, or will we be asked to vote on a blind Brexit?
Can I thank the honourable lady for the comments that she made about the language that was used at the weekend. What we will be looking for is to bring to this House a deal which incorporates the withdrawal agreement, but alongside that sufficient detail about the future relationship, that everybody is able to see what that future relationship will be. That will cover more than trade, but of course trade will be a key element of it.
Cheryl Merrick.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Will my right honourable friend please confirm that UK fishermen will not be subjected to an additional 12 months in the common fisheries policy with the crumbs Europe throw us in any extended implementation period?
Say to my honourable friend that the interests of fishermen across the whole of the United Kingdom and their concern to be out of the common fisheries policy is one of the key issues that is at the forefront of our thinking as we're looking at these different options that are being put forward. And I also recognise that the timing of negotiations on fishing has a particular impact here because, of course, fishing quotas for 2020, access to waters for 2021 will be determined in December 2020, and that's an aspect that we've already taken into account in our negotiations with the European Union.
Lightman.
Oh, sorry.
Mr Deputy Speaker, in the event of the Prime Minister being unable to strike a deal with the EU, will she commit to unilaterally guaranteeing the rights of those EU citizens that have chosen to make their lives here?
Yes, in the statement that I made after Salzburg, I made clear that in a no-deal situation we will guarantee the rights of EU citizens.
Simon Hall.
Mr Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend has my full support in dealing with these complex issues through the prism of the national interest. She will know that when we joined the EEC all those years ago, we did so on a cross-party basis comprised of women and men of goodwill. Should we not now seek to replicate this to deliver a people's parliamentary Brexit?
Can I thank my honourable friend? And I think when it comes to us bringing a deal back from the European Union and members across this House voting on that deal, I hope all members will recognise the importance of delivering on the vote of the British people and delivering a deal that is going to be good for the UK.
Nick Dakin.
Mr Deputy Speaker, in 2017 the Prime Minister went to the country to get a blank cheque for her approach to negotiating a deal for the UK, and the country said no thank you to giving her a blank cheque. So rather than hectoring our Leader of the Opposition, why doesn't she reach out in the spirit of party unity to try and get a deal in the interests of this country?
We are working to get a deal in the interests of this country, and as I recall in the general election last year, I think sort of 80% of members of Parliament were elected on the basis that they were going to deliver on the referendum.
Peterborough.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I got a text from Stephen North this morning. He's a leading councillor in my constituency and a stalwart of the Conservative Party, delivering leaflets knocking on doors for more than 20 years. His text said, "How can we drag a bad deal on for a year so it is watered down even more? Better off sticking to the date, be firm and have no deal." Prime Minister, I agree with Steve. Do you?
Can I say to my honourable friend, can I first of all thank his councillor, thank Steve for the work that he has done for the party over those many years. And as a former councillor myself, I know the hard work that councillors put in representing their local communities. Can I say to him, we're not talking about, I think this is one of the problems, that there's an assumption that we're suddenly saying we've signed up to extending an implementation period for a year. We have not done so. What we are saying is we need to ensure that we have a backstop in the withdrawal agreement. The proposal we put forward on a UK EU-wide customs territory, there has been a substantial shift from the EU. We are now working with them on that proposal. But the other proposal that has emerged is for us to have the option, as an alternative, of choosing to extend the implementation period for a short period of time, were that necessary. I want to work to make sure that neither of those are necessary.
Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Given that we've apparently made 95% progress with the withdrawal deal, how much percentage have we made with the substantive deal? And what percentage would she now say, given the answer she's already given today, would be sufficient for this House to vote on that deal? Would it be 95%, 100%, 60%, 40%? We seem to be flying in the wind on this one. Does she agree?
No, I don't. As I've said, we will bring forward detail about the future relationship alongside the withdrawal agreement so that the House knows what the future relationship will be.
Alberta Costa.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister understandably repeated that nothing is agreed until everything's agreed. Can I ask her equally to repeat tirelessly that it's her decision and this Conservative government that will guarantee the rights of EU nationals, deal or no deal?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I know this is an issue that he has particularly campaigned on, and I'm very happy to give him that reassurance that it is this Conservative government that has and will guarantee the rights of EU citizens, deal or no deal.
Joanne Shorey.
Deputy Speaker, on the question of a second referendum, given where we are now and given the promises that were made by the Leave campaign, doesn't it bother the Prime Minister at all that many of those who voted Leave in 2016 did so on a false prospectus?
Can I say to the honourable lady, that the referendum was held. There were lively campaigns, passionate campaigns on both sides of the argument. We gave the people their decision. The people took their decision. We should now deliver on it.
Richard Drax.
Does my right honourable friend agree with me that delivering on the referendum is a matter of trust and honour, and that some of the Prime Minister's backstops delays could erode that trust? Worse, the hands of the EU, whose tactics are delay and duplicity.
Sorry. Can I say to my honourable friend that it is precisely because I'm aware of the concerns that people would have of the possibility of us, in some circumstances, an attempt to keep us in this situation in some limbo permanently, that we are looking at the mechanisms and looking at how we can ensure that this is, if there is a backstop needed, it is only for a limited period of time to provide that bridge to the future relationship, and ideally doesn't have to be used at all.
Stephen Timmins.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has told us that parts of the political declaration on the future relationship have been agreed, including on services. What's been agreed on financial services?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that we have indeed, as I've said, made good progress on these issues. We've made good progress on transport, on services, and on elements of the other elements of the economic partnership and on the security partnership. We are still in the basis of negotiating those details such that we can bring them to the House at the point of final agreement.
Ian Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Prime Minister, if the transition period is made longer, my understanding is it will take us into the next EU budget period. If this is the case, how much would we need to pay in? And given that we will already have left the EU, how much say will we have over what we pay in?
First of all, as I've made clear, I do not intend, I don't want, and I don't expect us to have to go into a further period. We would make a sovereign, but if it were the case that a gap appeared between December 2020 and the full start of the future relationship, it would be what I'm looking at as a proposal that it would be a choice for the UK as to which of the backstop options we took forward, and obviously it would be necessary to look at the precise arrangements that would apply in both circumstances so that a clear choice could be made.
Debbie Abrahams.
I think the language that was used and directed at the Prime Minister this weekend was absolutely disgraceful. But there is real concern that the meaningful vote that was promised to this House will actually become a meaningless vote. Why will MEPs have a greater say in the UK final deal than MPs in this House?
Can I just repeat perhaps what I said earlier, which is that what we're looking at is an amendable vote. But I do think that, as I said, if members of the public are asked, Parliament is going to vote on the deal that the government brings back from the European Union, I think they would expect Parliament to be able to vote on the deal that the government brings back.
Mark Paulson.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Many businesses are continuing to invest, including Meggitt with their £130 million super site in my constituency, but a lack of certainty coming from the negotiations is causing many projects to be put on hold. I wonder if the Prime Minister could say what reassurance you can give to business for them to continue to invest and provide the jobs for the future.
Can I say to my honourable friend that I fully recognise, first of all, that we are continuing to see investment decisions being made by businesses and jobs being created by businesses in this country, as we saw from the excellent employment figures that we saw last week. Can I also say to him that what we want to do is to bring that certainty about as quickly as we can. That's why we're working for the deal. We're working to ensure that we end these negotiations and we can present that deal so business know where they stand for the future.
David Hampson.
Several hundred extradition agreements have been taken between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland in recent years. What progress has she made on securing the European arrest warrant for future use post-March?
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that I'm well aware of the impact that the European arrest warrant had on that ability to extradite between Northern Ireland and Ireland. That's one of the reasons, or others, why we have been working with the European Union and have made good progress on that aspect and other aspects of internal security.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. At the European Council meeting, was there many discussions on continuing security cooperation? Because as we saw with the Salisbury incident, it's vital that we continue to work for our allies regardless of the fact we're leaving the EU.
Yes. I can say to my honourable friend that there was a wider discussion on the importance of us continuing to work together on some of these very key security issues. Of course, the detail of the future relationship on security, internal security, such as issues on the European arrest warrant, are matters that are being looked at in the negotiations. But there's a very clear sense around the table of the importance of us all continuing to work together on key security issues.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The backstop is an insurance policy. Could the Prime Minister give an example of any insurance policy she's ever seen or signed up to that is based on an expiry date?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I don't know what insurance policy he takes out, but most insurance policies actually do have a renewable date in.
Rick Kapow.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I've met with a great many businesses in Taunton Deane, particularly in the last week, and there is overwhelming support amongst them for the Prime Minister. But what they all agree with, in particular, is they want a clear plan and they want to have it as soon as possible. But what they don't want is a permanent backstop. So could the Prime Minister give assurances she will press on with her endeavours and that she will never agree to a permanent backstop?
Can I say to my honourable friend, like the businesses she refers to, I don't want a permanent backstop either. I want to ensure we can move to the future relationship. Indeed, I don't want the backstop to have to be used at all.
Pete Wishart.
Scottish Conservative MPs threatened to resign, then they threatened not to resign. They threatened to bring down her Brexit deal, and then they say that they might not. Is the Prime Minister absolutely certain she's got the full support of her honourable friends from Scotland?
No. Yes, can I say yes? And can I also say that I welcome the significant contribution that my honourable friends from Scotland are making to debates in standing up for Scotland in this chamber?
Yes. Richard Graham.
When Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was negotiating the handover of Hong Kong, the final agreement did not see all her starting goals realised, but she did sign a settlement which all sides could live with and which allowed Hong Kong to flourish thereafter. Would my right honourable friend draw courage from that precedent and ignore some of the outrageous things in the media about her and the negotiation?
Thank you. Can I say to my honourable friend that, yes, I think any negotiation is about two sides coming together and actually coming to an agreement that they can both sign up to and that they can both agree. And does that mean both sides get 100% of what they started off wanting? Actually, no, by the nature of a negotiation. What's important is that we get a good deal out of this and that we work hard to get the sort of deal that we think is in the interests of this country.
Mr Deputy Speaker, while I often disagree with the Prime Minister on matters of policy, I stand in full solidarity with her against the dreadful language and the threats that were made at the weekend. Given that we have less than 5 months to go, or a little over 5 months until the end of March, how does she think that we should work to eradicate this sort of language and these sort of threats, particularly to female MPs, given that we are supposed to set an example in this House?
Well, can I thank the honourable lady for the comments that she's made, and indeed, as I've said, for those other honourable and right honourable members of this House who shared similar sentiments in their interventions. I think it is incumbent on all of us to be careful about the language that we use in public, and I think it is comments like the one that she has made and others have made today, I think, are part of encouraging that recognition of the importance of being careful and carefully considering the impact that language we use has.
That she doesn't want to extend the transition period. Will she make it clear to the EU that if that transition period is extended, we're not going to be paying any more money?
As my honourable friend has said, it's very clear. What I want is for both sides, and there is commitment to this, for both sides to work to have that future relationship in place by the end of December 2020. If we do have to bridge, and we have to make a choice as to which backstop option, assuming that these two options are there, that we take, we would of course have to look at the arrangements for that, and we would be negotiating in relation to those arrangements. But what we want to ensure is that we get the good deal and a deal done in time to ensure that the backstop arrangement, whichever it is, does not have to be used.
Catherine Wise.
Deputy Speaker, the NHS and the supermarkets are now stockpiling goods and the cost of storage is increasing. Will those costs, will there be a compensation scheme opened by the government or will they be passed down to consumers?
Can I say, the commercial bodies will obviously make their own decisions about the arrangements that they have to make. Last time I looked, the NHS was part of government.
James Cleveland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I utterly condemn the violent, misogynistic language that has been used, whether it be threats of stabbing from voices on my own benches or threats of lynching from voices opposite. Will she agree with me that the United Kingdom government would never demand a European Union member state carve off a part of itself as part of any agreement? And would she therefore also agree with me that it's completely unacceptable for the idea of Northern Ireland to be carved off from the rest of the United Kingdom as we go through this negotiation?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. I wouldn't require any other EU member state to do this, and it is unacceptable for the EU to require us to effectively carve Northern Ireland away from the United Kingdom with that customs border down the Irish Sea. I've made that very clear, and that's why we're looking for alternative backstop proposals.
Dr. Ripaha.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The huge number of people marching for a democratic say on the next steps, a fresh assessment of the will of the people, shouldn't be ignored by any government, unless it's perhaps not being completely full with all that it knows with us. So can I ask the Prime Minister, does she think that her deal at the end of all this will leave us better off than the deal that we already have as EU members? Yes or no?
Yes, we're working. I've been very clear that we're working for a good deal, and our best days lie ahead of us. But it's getting that good deal, getting good deals around the rest of the world, and ensuring that we build a better and brighter future for the people of this country.
James Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Prime Minister's comments about future progress made on security cooperation at the European Council, and notwithstanding the big issues that still face her in relation to the negotiation, that security relationship is absolutely critical to the future, particularly in relation to combating cyber attacks across international boundaries.
Well, my honourable friend raises a very important point, particularly in relation to cyber attacks and continuing to work with the European Union on these issues, and that's why concern about cyber attacks was one of the reasons why I, with the Dutch Prime Minister, was very keen to press the EU to move ahead on this work to see how we can ensure that we're taking measures, including potentially sanctions, in relation to this, and we will continue to work with them on that.
Ian Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister has completely and utterly dismissed the 770,000 people who marched in London on Saturday and the many hundreds of thousands who would have marched if they could have been in London. And the Prime Minister is going to fix the vote in this House for her withdrawal deal. What message does that send to the many millions of people who are demanding a people's vote?
I have to say to the honourable gentleman, I think I've answered this question earlier, and I refer him to the answers I gave earlier.
The Deputy Speaker.
Negotiating a good deal is hard. Anyone who's negotiated anything will know it's hard to get a good deal, and none of us have tried to negotiate this. So can I urge my right honourable friend to continue to hold her nerve, not to capitulate, as some would have her do, but to hold her nerve to negotiate the best possible deal for my constituents and our country?
Yes. Can I say to my honourable friend, I think absolutely this is the time when we do need to hold our nerve as we come to the end of these negotiations in order to get that good deal.
Helen Governor.
Deputy Speaker, could the Prime Minister tell us what practical steps she has taken to build a consensus across the parties and across the nation for where this country moves ahead?
Yes, first of all, actually operating and ensuring that everything we're doing is in the basis of the national interest. That is what this government has put first and foremost, and that's what we will continue to put first and foremost.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you. Can I urge my right honourable friend to pay no heed to the vile comments in Sunday's paper, but instead to remain focused on the prize of delivering frictionless trade between Northern Ireland and Ireland, between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, and between the UK and the rest of the EU, because so many jobs and livelihoods depend on getting that right.
I thank my honourable friend for her comments and give her the assurance that we are absolutely focused on getting that good deal, getting that good trading relationship that will protect jobs here in the United Kingdom.
Jim Shannon. Mr Deputy Speaker, when we entered the common market in 1973, the fishing sector had their rights denied and the fishing waters reduced. So can the Prime Minister confirm that when we leave the EU on the 29th of March, that we will take back our coastal waters and that our fishing sector will experience the boom years that are yet to come?
I say to the honourable gentleman that indeed we fully recognise the concerns that there were about the way in which the fishing industry was treated in the negotiations when we entered the EEC back then in the 1970s. I'm clear that we will become an independent coastal state. We will be able to take back that control. We'll be able to make those decisions, negotiate on our own behalf on those issues, rather than it being done by the European Union, but also that we want to see how we can enhance our fishing industry around the United Kingdom for the future.
Tross.
The implementation period was undesirable. Can I urge the Prime Minister to use far stronger language when it comes to the Common Fisheries Policy and confirm that we will no longer remain tied to the CFP beyond December 2020?
As I have said earlier, the interests of fishermen across the whole of the United Kingdom is one of the issues that is at the forefront of our thinking as we're looking for all of these arrangements and all of these proposals. And as I have said, I also recognise that there are timetabling issues in relation to the ability to be able to negotiate as an independent coastal state once we leave the European Union. And I can assure my honourable friend that we will be putting those concerns right at the forefront of our thinking.
Jonathan Edwards.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the comments in the Prime Minister's statements in condemning the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. However, in an answer to a parliamentary question by myself following the murder, the British government confirmed it would still be sending high-ranking diplomats to the Future Investments Initiative in Ryder this week, despite all the spin we've seen in terms of removing the Secretary of State for International Trade from the delegation. Following further revelations over the weekend, rather than empty gestures and words, isn't a full boycott more appropriate, and a strategic rethink of our relations with Saudi Arabia?
As the honourable gentleman heard me say right at the beginning of my statement, deep concern that we have about the what has happened in relation to Jamal Khashoggi and what is being revealed. We do need to make sure that we get absolutely to the truth of what has happened. But we're very clear. The original proposal was that the Secretary of State could attend that particular event, and it was right that we decided that there would be no ministerial attendance.
Rachel.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Our region of the West Midlands and the town of Redditch is creating new businesses at a record rate due to our innovative and creative entrepreneurs. Does the Prime Minister, can she confirm to the House that she's continuing to strain every sinew to ensure their future prosperity?
Yes, I'm happy to give that reassurance to my honourable friend, not only in relation to our negotiations with the European Union, but also in our modern industrial strategy, ensuring that we are a great place, one of the best places to set up and grow a business in the world.
Paul Speen.
Does the Prime Minister not agree that a meaningful vote is only meaningful if the votes on the amendments come before the vote on the principle of the deal or not? And if that doesn't happen, she'll be sent home to think again by this Parliament. And also, if she does lose that meaningful vote, will she accept that she has lost the confidence of the House?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, we have been very clear that the vote will be an amendable vote. Obviously, the procedure committee, perhaps the honourable gentleman might like to listen to the answer if he wants to have an answer to his question. The procedure committee is, of course, considering the nature of the vote. But as I've said to a number of his honourable friends, I think if you went out and asked the members of the public if Parliament's voting on the deal the government brings back, what do you expect Parliament to vote on? They would say they would expect Parliament to be able to vote on the deal that the government brings back.
Mr Deputy Speaker.
On Thursday, the Secretary of State for Environment,
Food and Rural Affairs, stood at the dispatch box and said he was invincibly confident that we would be an independent coastal state by December 2020. Can I ask my right honourable friend if she shares his confidence, and would she make the same commitment?
I am confident, because I'm confident that we can negotiate our future relationship such that it comes into place on the 1st of January 2021.
Dr. Lisa Cameron.
Many thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. It was absolutely disturbing to see the vile language towards the Prime Minister regarding EU negotiations, which I have to say doesn't just affect the individual but the whole family. It was particularly sobering because only a week ago an individual was charged in relation to abuse of myself. People watch how we treat each other in here, and we have to act as role models. Does the Prime Minister agree, as elected members, we must now take a rain check and never ever perpetuate abuse in politics?
Yes. Can I say to the Honourable Lady, I'm sorry to hear that she herself has been subject to abuse, which has indeed led, as I understand from her question, to somebody being charged in relation to that, or action being taken against an individual in relation to that. I think it is very important that if we are going to have good, healthy debate in this country on matters of policy, on politics, that actually we're able to have that debate in a way where we will disagree. You know, there will be disagreements, there will be strong disagreements and strong views held, but we need to conduct those discussions in a way that does not lead to abuse of people, and we need to conduct those discussions in a respectful manner.
Speaker, the Prime Minister has been very clear today that a second referendum is not on the table because we must respect the views of the 17.5 million who voted to leave. But isn't there another reason why it's inappropriate to have another referendum with remaining on the agenda, and that is that it will prejudice our negotiations by creating an incentive for the European Union to give us an extremely bad deal?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. Not only I think that we owe it to the 17.4 million people who voted to leave the European Union, but also because it needs to be very clear to the European Union that we will be leaving, and there is no question of that second referendum. And that's why I was particularly surprised to hear that the Shadow Foreign Secretary has today said that if there was a second referendum under Labour's proposal, Remain could be on that ballot. That is going back on the vote that people gave in 2016.
Sure, Malcolm Macklin.
Turning to the security aspect of our statement, did they discuss at all the INF Treaty, which this week America is expected to announce is going to leave? That won't help bring Russia back into compliance, and it will be dangerous for us all. Does she have a strategy to ensure that doesn't happen?
The honourable gentleman asked if that particular issue was discussed at the European Union Council, and it was not discussed at the European Union Council. A number of other matters in relation to security were discussed. I mean, we continue to believe that it's important for that treaty to continue, but that parties to that treaty must abide by that treaty.
Mr Deputy Speaker, shouldn't the people of Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland have the opportunity to give their consent to any deal she brings back, or indeed in the event of no deal, which makes any change to the Irish border as set out in the Good Friday Agreement?
Are very well aware of the obligations that we have and the commitments that we have as a result of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and we are working to ensure that we maintain all of those because we recognise the importance of that agreement.
Trisha Gibson.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the Electoral Commission has ruled that the Leave campaign broke electoral law with regard to spending limits. Does she think that this in any way undermines the result of the referendum? And if she doesn't, can she explain then what is the point of electoral law?
I say to the Honourable Lady, I understand that the matter that she has referred to is actually subject to judicial proceedings. I also say that we gave the people of the... We also gave the people a vote. The people made their choice. The people made their choice, and we are delivering on that choice.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. She told her friend from Gainsborough earlier on that if the meaningful vote does not succeed in this House, that she intends to carry on as Prime Minister till March the 29th next year and deliver a no-deal Brexit. Is that really her position?
Prime Minister.
Absolutely. What I said to my right honourable friend, the member for Gainsborough, was that we will be leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019, and we will.
Martin Doherty.
Speaker, the status of British, Irish citizens in Northern Ireland is protected under the Good Friday Agreement, which means if they wish they can legally renounce their British citizenship and receive no detriment to their social or democratic rights. Can the Prime Minister therefore state unequivocally that people born in Northern Ireland will continue to be able to be solely Irish, identify as Irish, and therefore EU citizens after Brexit?
Can I reassure the honourable gentleman that if he looks at the joint report that we agreed with the European Union in last December, he will see that this matter is covered in that, and we are guaranteeing the continuing rights of those citizens.
Vice Street. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. No one in the Labour Party underestimates how difficult the Prime Minister's job is going to be when she's sat there around the negotiating table with her own MPs trying to hammer out a deal. But if she is so confident of her position and her support from the public, and given her failure to build consensus and compromise across this House, instead of losing a politician's vote, as is now likely to happen on her deal, if she's so confident, why won't she put her deal to the British people to give their say and their authority over the final deal?
I say to the honourable gentleman, he's a sort of ingenious way of asking the same question that some of his colleagues have answered. I answered this question earlier. This House will have a meaningful vote on the deal, and obviously following that meaningful vote, if that deal is agreed, then we will be putting the withdrawal agreement and implementation bill into place, and it will be this Parliament that will be determining that bill and progressing that bill through Parliament. But I return to the point that I think it is so important that politicians across this House recognise that having given the vote to the British people, we then deliver on the vote of the British people, and we in no way, as the Shadow Foreign Secretary and the Labour Party is suggesting, attempt to go back to people and try to tell them that they got the first decision wrong. No, they've made their decision, we deliver on it.
Drew Hendry.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister has pointed out unique arrangements with the Government of Remain voting Gibraltar in order to protect their economies. Why has she ruled out the same unique considerations for the people of Remain voting Scotland?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I think he will recognise that the issue of Gibraltar is a particular one in relation to its geographical position and obviously the arrangements that have been put in place over a number of years with Spain. And it's a different situation from the Scotland, which of course, as part of the United Kingdom, will be leaving the European Union. Gibraltar will be leaving alongside the United Kingdom, and we ensure that the arrangements are in place to protect their economy.
Madeline Moon.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has estimated that there needs to be a 6-week stockpile of food and medicines. What about those manufacturing companies like Ford in my constituency and the SMEs who provide components? What if they can't stockpile for 6 weeks? Will there be compensation for industry and for those employees who may be laid off because of chaos at our ports?
I say to the honourable lady that she will have seen the various arrangements that are put in place and that are referred to in the technical notices that we have issued. What we are doing is making the preparations for no deal because we haven't come to the final conclusion of these negotiations. I believe that coming to a good deal is the best outcome for the United Kingdom, and actually I think from the side of the European Union there is a recognition of the importance of coming to a good deal with the United Kingdom, and a good deal for us I think will be a good deal for them.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the PM says negotiations with the EU are 95% settled. The Scottish Affairs Committee has been taking evidence on trade, and witness after witness has made clear how vital PGIs are to Scotland's interest. What assurances can the PM now give us that such protections for Scotland and the UK's unique products will remain as strong as they are now?
I say to the honourable lady, geographical indicators are one of the issues that we have spent some considerable time considering with the European Union, because we recognise the importance of geographical indicators. She said that 95% of it, everything was agreed. 95% of the withdrawal agreement has been agreed.
Thank you. Anna McMorran.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. 1.5 million young people have not had their chance to have a say on Brexit, yet would be eligible to vote on the biggest issue facing us since the Second World War. Why deny them the chance to vote on this crucial issue for their futures?
Can I say to the honourable lady that if we followed the position that everybody in any year who became eligible to vote should be able to vote on this issue, we would end up in a never-ending set of votes in relation to Brexit, rather than doing what the British people want, which is actually leave the European Union and do it on good terms.
Thomas Shepherd.
The Prime Minister has on many occasions referred to the result of the 2016 referendum. Can I ask her, does she accept that in a democracy people have the right to change their minds?
Well, can I say to the honourable gentleman that of course people sometimes change their minds, but the government was very clear at the time that the choice was being, it wasn't just the government actually, if you look at the vote that took place across Parliament, the overwhelming majority of members of this House agreed that there should be a referendum and the choice should be given to the British people. Various SNP members are going, not us, so the SNP didn't think the British people should be able to decide their future.
Martin Whitfield.
Grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker. If nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, is it possible that a successful amendment on the meaningful vote could send the Prime Minister back to renegotiate?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that, of course, what we're talking about is the negotiations, coming to an end point in the negotiations, having agreed a withdrawal agreement and the future relationship, and then bringing that agreed deal back to this House for this House to vote on it.
Lloyd Russell-Moyle.
The PM is keen to avoid a permanent customs union and single market arrangement, despite some of the Brexiteers promising the exact same benefit. If she's unable to achieve the exact same benefit, is it time to let the people take back control, either with a general election or a third referendum, 75, 2016, on this issue?
No.
Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister must know that as she continues to hold herself to ransom for the whim of the minority of members of this place who subscribe to either the ERG or the DUP, then it will be a choice between a rotten deal and no deal. When is she going to see sense and seek to find consensus among the 600 members of this House who are not members of either of those two damaging splinter groups?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I hope we will find consensus among the 650 members of this House and we bring a good deal back to vote on.